In the fall of 2001, players stepped into a concrete maze. Liberty City was deliberately muted, bathed in gray fog and overcast skies, to sell the illusion of a grim, unforgiving East Coast metropolis. Looking at a standard development timeline, a hit of that size usually triggers a long hibernation. Studios typically spend 3 to 5 years building the next iteration, iterating slowly on their core mechanics to protect their investment. Rockstar compressed that entire process into 12 months. By the following October, they released a full standalone follow-up, completely discarding the visual identity that had just made them millions. This photograph of the Miami coast highlights the exact aesthetic they pivoted toward. They traded the smog and concrete for pastel suits, blinding sunsets, and palm trees, dropping players squarely into a hyper-saturated 1986. Throwing out a winning playbook to rebuild an entirely new atmosphere from scratch in a single year is a massive financial risk. Yet, 2 decades later, fans consistently point to this specific release as the creative peak of the series. This rapid turnaround took the massive commercial momentum of the previous year and used it to turn the series into a definitive, recognizable cultural icon. The 12-month sprint allowed developers to rethink how a player actually interacts with a digital city. They introduced a system they called Empire Management. Instead of just driving past static building facades, the environment opened up. You could walk off the pavement, push through a set of double doors, and step into fully modeled interiors like a packed nightclub. And you could buy those buildings. The in-game economy expanded to let you purchase major assets: a film studio, a sprawling waterfront mansion, or a downtown taxi firm, each generating daily revenue. In the previous year's release, players spent their time at the bottom of the food chain, taking orders at payphones and running errands for local bosses who held all the capital. Purchasing these properties anchored the player to the map, shifting the gameplay focus from simple survival to territorial expansion. To match that new sense of ownership, the narrative required an overhaul. The protagonist of the previous game never spoke a single word, which limited the complexity of the storytelling. To fix that, Rockstar went straight to Hollywood and cast Liotta to voice the new lead character, Tommy Vercetti. Giving the main character a voice meant he could finally talk back. The writers could now script complex arguments, sharp jokes, and genuine friction between the lead and his rivals. That dialogue allowed the studio to lean heavily into satire, skewering the excess, paranoia, and relentless consumerism that defined mid-80s America. Having a recognized actor deliver those lines proved that video game scripts could demand the exact same level of performance as a major motion picture. The final piece of the overhaul happened on the car radio. Generic background tracks were scrapped in favor of a massive, fully licensed music library. They acquired the rights to some of the most expensive catalogs in the world, including massive global hits by Michael Jackson. They layered the stations with immense variety, securing moody, defining art pop records from artists like Kate Bush, and they rounded it out with aggressive heavy metal anthems from Ozzy Osbourne to score the high-speed pursuits. This tracklist did heavy lifting for the setting, forcing players to constantly listen to the actual radio charts from 1986, locked them deep into the historical illusion. This collage represents the 3 mechanics that came together in that single year: a fully licensed soundtrack, a voiced narrative, and deep economic systems. Combined, they showed that an open-world design didn't have to be a directionless sandbox. It could be a highly controlled, immersive period piece. The success of this one-year pivot showed the industry that high-level production values and a curated licensed soundtrack were now essential components of the open-world experience. But the most fascinating result happened with the audience. Millions of the people buying copies were children or teenagers in 2002, meaning they were entirely too young to have actually lived through 1986. The satire was so thick and the aesthetic so cohesive that it effectively became their primary memory of the era. The game shaped how an entire generation remembers the 1980s. Vice City remains a landmark because it didn't bother trying to simulate a historically accurate decade. Instead, it perfectly captured our collective, hyper-colored fantasy of what that time felt like.